All right, best documentary. What do you got?
All right. This was, I mean, opposite of animation for me. This is a really good year for documentaries. Or
I
maybe
agree.
maybe I just watched more documentaries this year. Maybe that's it. But there were great documentaries that I took off my list that in any other year I feel
Same.
like
Yeah.
would have been in the top
For
five.
sure.
Yeah.
So I'll start with The Remarkable Life of Evelyn. I
Hmm.
was shocked by how much I like this movie. I was not expecting to. I'm not like a World of Warcraft person. I'm not, but I am a person who has built relationships in communities online.
Yeah.
Online communities are the reason I'm in Kentucky.
Mhm.
My buddy Mike, who I've podcasted with, who you've had on the show, Mike Dennison.
Shout out Mike.
We're
Oh, gotta love
buddies.
Mike.
I came to his wedding and ended up moving out here. And I have, because of podcasting, I have an entire community of people in Lexington, Kentucky. Like I ended up having more friends in Kentucky than in California. And it was like, so watching this, as a start, I was like, okay, this is nice. Families getting to experience their son's life in a way that they never were able to. It's more full. It's more exciting. That's really cool. And as you mentioned earlier, JD, the way they use the animation here to literally color his online life was really moving. But the scene, one of my favorite scenes of the year in any movie, is one of his World of Warcraft friends giving a hug to his father at his funeral. And it was so like, I was just like, man, it was
Very
brutal to
moving.
watch.
So
Yeah.
moving.
Like you knew my son in a way I never could. And thank you for being his friend. Like what an impactful moment that was. So definitely worth watching. It's, as JD mentioned, it's on Netflix, readily available for like probably 99% of the people listening to this probably have Netflix. So highly, highly recommend that. The next one is definitely I don't know if it's as good as I think it is. It's a very personal pick. The Superman documentary about Christopher Reeve.
Oh, yeah.
My dad, who passed away a few years ago, the Superman movies were his favorite. And he shared that with me. So I remember vividly when that accident happened, and when he lost the use of many parts of his body. And I remember it being a very emotional moment. So I basically cried the entire runtime of that movie. Like just dad's presence was there. And it was just like, so I couldn't possibly leave it off the list. I think it's also quite good and quite moving and an interesting discussion of disability and a really wonderful discussion of grief and what family means. I found it really impactful and really moving. I was lucky enough to actually be able to see it in the theater, and then I regretted it because I was crying the entire time. I was like, maybe home would be a better.
It gets the perseverance of that man so right, regardless of how you feel about the movie as a movie. But it gets that crucial thing right.
And his change, where he realized, like, I don't have to push so hard. I don't have to be tough dad. I can just love my kids. I can just be there for him. And the fact that it took a debilitating injury for him to slow down enough to just be like, not everything is about performance. It could just be about watching TV with my son and holding him close in whatever way I can. And I'm not even a parent. And I was like, oh God, this is a lot. So yeah, definitely recommend that one. It's one that missed the shortlist for the Academy, unfortunately, but I understand why, because like I said, really good, really big year for documentaries. The next one will make Brendan happy. Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. I thought was incredible. Honestly, just as a mixed media piece. It is not your normal documentary. It uses a lot of tech. It's not just a bunch of talking heads. It uses a lot of video. It uses a lot of different techniques, a lot of different styles, and which makes sense with the form of jazz, right? I mean, it's like many different styles kind of ad-libbed, all thrown together, but yet it works as a complete piece. And it also educated me on the history of a country that I had no idea about. So that was nice to like walk away from and be like, oh, I know a little something about this now. So I really enjoyed that one. The next one is Sugarcane, the first of two documentaries that will rip your friggin' heart out, because this is about native schools in Canada, where many years later they discovered, bodies of the native kids and everything that they went through, and
very similar to Nickel Boys in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Horrifyingly similar to Nickel Boys. Yes.
Actually, that's another great double feature. I should have mentioned that earlier in my earlier nominees.
I don't know if I can watch those back to back, man. That's that might be too much for me back to back.
I guess I have thick skin. I don't know.
Yeah. I remember hearing about this news story when it first broke. And our writer Will Bjarnar, one of our favorites, he did the review for that, and I remember reading it, and I was like, oh well, this will ruin my night. Let's watch that, and it did, in the best possible way. It's a story that needs to be told. These difficult stories need to be told, even if they're hard for us to see. And speaking of hard for us to see, the winner, which also probably would have won my best international film if I left it there, is No Other Land. This is a movie that first displays the cowardice of film companies. The fact that this has not been distributed is disgusting.
Wild.
Because this is one of the best documentaries of the past 10 years. It is incredible. It is the fact that we have an Israeli man and a Palestinian man working together to film this.
Cultural unity.
You couldn't write it any better. And this actually happened. And yes, there are moments that are hard to watch, but they should be. We need to see this. And I think the part that affected me most in this movie is the Israeli man who is, writing these articles about it and trying to put a stop to it. He basically stands in front of this violence, and they ask him, like, why do you even bother? It doesn't affect you. And he says, because you're doing it in my name. And that part, I was like, ooh, that is something we need to pay attention to, not just in this conflict, but in every conflict. Because think of the things as Americans that are done in our name. There's a lot of violence and heinous behavior within our country and without that we need to start putting a check on. And because it's being done in our name. And this movie, I think it's only like an hour and a half, but
it's pretty brief.
It feels like you ran a marathon after you watch this movie, because it
feels dangerous.
It hits hard. And this is the best documentary of the year, maybe the best documentary of the decade. It should be, and I don't say this about very many documentaries, this should be required viewing. Everyone should watch this. I think even if you don't think it's the best documentary of the year, I don't think it's arguable that it's the most important documentary of the year.
For sure.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think all of these documentaries that we're going to be talking about are going to be required viewing, or at least we feel like they're required viewing, because I think there's something so culturally crucial about all of them. No Other Land is a great example as to why that is. Whether you think it is the best or not, it is the most crucial. It is the most important, I think. And Dave, as much as I hate agreeing with you every step of the way, we are lockstep 80% of the way on this category. No Other Land, The Remarkable Life of Evelyn, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and Sugarcane are all my nominees. My fifth one's Dahomey, which I think is a really
that was my number 6, so we're pretty close.
We're pretty close. I think my 6 might have been Sperm World, if I had to pick a 6th one there, which is a really interesting one. But those are my 5 there. As much as I do agree that No Other Land is perhaps the best documentary of the year, I am giving it to Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, because it was just it's surprise, right?
We're all
the documentary that was tailor-made for Brendan Cassidy.
You got to be you. I respect it. I respect it.
There's no way I wasn't going to pick this one. It was tailor-made for me. But even so, outside of just the subjectivity that I have towards it, the fusion of jazz history with actual history, I think is so cleverly done, expertly done here. I've never seen a movie like this before. I think it was film critic, I think it was maybe Maria Gates, if I'm not mistaken, that compared this to, or not compared this, but described this as a political thriller, as if it were a video essay, which is
accurate.
I've never seen a movie described like that before. So it's kind of a one-of-a-kind thing. So I think it is quite great. One of my favorite movies of the year, regardless of its categorization.
Nice.
Yeah. I am fully in lockstep in terms of nominations with Brendan. The Remarkable Life of Evelyn, Sugarcane, Dahomey, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and No Other Land. Those are my 5 nominees as well. However, in terms of winners, I'm with Dave, so I'm kind of splitting the difference here a little bit. No
God,
Other
you're
Land
so
is
smart.
also
Have
my
I ever
winner here.
mentioned how smart you are? Well done, JT.
Appreciate it. No,
I take
agree.
pride never agreeing with Dave.
And I think what's interesting is that in any other year, if No Other Land didn't exist, I think my winner quite easily would be Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. It is a really great movie, and you can still even argue that as a film and how its mechanics and are working, interweaving all of those elements, it's incredible.
It's
But there
definitely
is
more
something
complex. Good Lord.
it is, yeah. But there is something about the vitality of No Other Land, the bleakness of it, and as you noted earlier, the collusion of Palestinian and Israeli journalists working together to convey the displacement and the cleansing that is happening in the West Bank. And it is incredibly harrowing to watch. There are things unfold on camera. I mean, they actively seek it out. When they see something that is happening, they will literally run toward it. They run toward the danger and talk about how they're filming this not for themselves. They talk explicitly about how they are wanting to expose this to the rest of the world, particularly the Western powers, because they know they're the countries that have the power to do something about this, which I think is absolutely incredible. And then in the midst of all of that, it is also this beautiful movie about friendship between two, these two individuals that come from the two countries that are in conflict here, and they're fighting for the same thing and wanting to maintain hope. And like how that relationship forms throughout the film is deeply poignant as well. So it might not have the filmmaking tricks of something like Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, but I do love what this film is doing in terms of the demonstrating the grim realities that are happening around them and seeking that out, and underlying that with this really humanistic story of two friends and what the world can look like when you come together instead of being conflict, and how that unfolds in the film. It truly is stunning. Really,
it's like guerrilla filmmaking. Like they're just picking up a camera and figuring it out.
And just it's incredible. It's really, really incredible.
Like I said, it
stuff.
feels dangerous. It feels like something you watch. You have to be like fearing for your life that you know too much information that you shouldn't know. Like it's like this revealing of a
film studios clearly don't want you to. So now's the time. And it's crazy to me that like not a single film studio has picked this up, because this is like almost guaranteed going to be nominated for an Oscar. Like this is the easiest. This is like the easiest business decision for any movie studio, except for maybe other things going on behind the scenes. So
well, and the sad thing is that's what they're waiting on, because that'll be their excuse card when they go to market it, because they don't want to touch the material. They want to just use the Oscar card.
That's right.
So
that's right. It's really unfortunate because it's a beautiful piece of film. So